In this video, we'll show you how you can take your drone hyperlapses to the next level. The hyperlapse mode came out in the new DJI Mavic 2, and today we'll be shooting with the Mavic 2 Pro. Here's a look at what we'll be doing.
We'll dig into After Effects for most of the post-production work, but you can still pull off a few of these techniques using just Premiere if you don't have After Effects. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you are shooting raw images with your Mavic. Then get your drone in the air and identify your point of interest that will serve as the main focal point for your hyperlapse. In this case, I'm going to use a structure on the roof of our building as the focal point. Take the time to frame the shot how you'd like it. Here, at an altitude of 218 feet, we can have the camera tilted down to our focal point, but still get some of the horizon and skyline in our shot for added visual interest. Now tap the controller icon to switch flight modes. Select Hyperlapse and then make sure you choose Save when it asks if you'd like to save the individual photos of the hyperlapse. Also, make sure you have enough card space to do so. We're using a 16GB micro SD card, which should be plenty. So there are a few different hyperlapse options, but we want to do a circle hyperlapse, so we'll select that. I'm also happy with the default settings of 2-second intervals between shots, creating a 5-second long hyperlapse. Now just draw a box with your finger around your target focal point. Once the app is able to lock onto it, just tap the Go button on the right and let the app do the rest of the work. It'll run a quick calculation and then get to work shooting the photos. This is going to shoot 125 photos that'll make up our hyperlapse. Once it's done, DJI will then process all the images to create a hyperlapse automatically, which is fine for some instances, but we can do better. Let's head back and start editing. Since we saved all 125 images as raw DNG files, we're going to import them into Lightroom to edit. So we'll start by applying one of our presets, and in this case, the MS Portrait one looks best. We'll also just adjust the white balance a little. We'll then add a little dehaze to it. We can even add graduated filters to bring in some warmth of the sunset. And once we're happy with the edit, we'll then highlight all the other photos and click Sync. We'll check all the boxes and hit Synchronize. This will apply all the adjustments we made to the first photo to the other 124 images. We can then export all of the photos as high-res JPEGs. We just want to make sure that each photo is named sequentially. So since we have 125 photos, we'll choose the 001 option to ensure each photo ends up in the right order. If you want to follow along with our post-production process, but you don't have the ability to take a hyperlapse drone shot, we've included all of the individual JPEGs we just exported in the description below for you to download. We're not going to process the hyperlapse with After Effects. You can use Premiere to get some of the basics accomplished, but for the more advanced techniques, After Effects is definitely the way to go. Okay, so first we'll go to File, Import File, and navigate to our photos we just exported. We'll click on any one of the photos and click the Options button down at the bottom. We'll ensure that Create Composition and Importer JPEG Sequence are both checked, and then let's click Open. All right, now it's automatically created a composition for us with the entire hyperlapse. We'll just right-click on the composition and choose Composition Settings. Since we edit all of our videos on a 23.976 frames per second timeline, we want to change the composition to match. If we play back the footage, you can see it's not entirely smooth, the drone wavers a little bit, so we're going to stabilize it to fix that. Start by trying the warp stabilizer because when it works, it makes your job a lot easier. In this case, you can see it's causing some weird stuff to happen with the building here, so we're going to try another method. We'll just click on the clip, and in our tracker window, we'll click Stabilize Motion. We'll just choose Position, and then find a spot on our main building to use as a basis for the stabilization. In this case, we're going to use the entire window pane here as our tracking point and go ahead and track through our footage. After it's complete, we just want to scrub through our footage to make sure the tracker did a good job of locking onto our target point. If you find that the tracker jumps around and has issues locking in, try picking another spot on your footage that has a lot of contrast. All right, now we'll just hit Apply. Playing back our footage now, you can see that's done a nice job of stabilizing the scene, but it's super jittery. We'll right-click on our footage and go to Frame Blending, Pixel Motion. If you want to see the effect that Pixel Motion has on your footage, enable the Master Frame Blending switch right here. But right now we'll leave it off because it slows down After Effects a lot. All right, now we need to pre-compose our footage. And if you don't know what pre-composing is, it's basically After Effects' version of nesting something. So let's right-click and select Pre-compose. We want to make sure Move All Attributes is selected, and then we'll click OK. Now, since these are individual photos, there's no motion blur, so let's add a little. We'll go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and call it Motion Blur. In the Effects panel, we'll add CC Force Motion Blur. And we'll leave the default settings intact for now. If you want, you click the eyeball to hide the blur layer because it will slow down your computer considerably. Just make sure you activate it before your final export. Another thing we want to change is the sun. It's looking a little bit sad in these photos, so let's replace it a little bit with the lens flare so we can feel like J.J. Abrams.
You said that your wife told you to stop with the lens flares. Your wife, Katie, said, that's enough with the lens flares.
Well, I mean, Katie's told me to stop with a lot of things, but...
First, let's motion track our sun. We'll click on our footage composition and choose Track Motion in the tracker window. We're going to move the tracker over to the sun and increase the size to include the entire sun. The smaller inside box here tells After Effects what part you want to track, and the larger box tells After Effects where it can look in each frame for that tracking point. Since this shot moves along the horizon, we can just extend this outside box out to the sides a little more, and that way it'll do a better job of tracking our shot. Now we'll click the Analyze Forward button to start tracking. And once that's finished, we'll create a null object, which will store all of our tracking information. We'll call this layer Sun Null, and then click on Edit Target in the tracker window and select the Sun Null. Then we can hit Apply. Now let's create the flare. We'll go to Layer, New, Solid, make sure the color is black, and then click Make Comp Size and click OK. Now we highly recommend using Video Copilot's Optical Flares plugin if you can afford it, but there is a free lens flare plugin that comes free with After Effects, so let's just go with that for now. In the Effects and Presets panel, just type in Lens Flare and add it to our new solid. For the blending mode, let's change that from Normal to Add. And now for this shot, it looks like the 105mm lens type works best. We'll just lower the brightness amount to 35% or so. Now on the sun layer, hit P to see the position keyframes from our track, and then on the flare effect, under Flare Center, hold Option or Alt and click the stopwatch. All right, now let's grab the pick whip and drag it over to the position property on the sun null layer. As you can see, the flare automatically snaps to the position of the sun, and we can just scrub through the clip and see that it stays tracked throughout the scene. Now we can also blend the flare into the scene a little better. In the Effects and Presets window, type in Tint and add the tint effect to the flare. Click on the eyedropper next to tint and then grab the brightest part of the sunset colors. Now it's looking a lot better. Okay, now let's select all of the layers and pre-compose them. In this new window, let's resize it to 1920 by 1080. We'll right-click on the footage, go to Transform, Fit to Comp Width. Then we'll scale it up so we don't see the black edges from our stabilization. Now let's add a little speed ramp to make it a little more dynamic. We'll right-click and select Time, Enable Time Remapping. It now has added time remap keyframes for the first and last frame of our composition. What we'll do is at around 11 frames in, we'll add another keyframe, but we'll change the time to around 2 seconds. This is basically telling After Effects that at 11 frames in, we want the footage to already be at the 2-second mark, which speeds things up 4x. All right, now you can see it whips in pretty fast. Since we have a lot of resolution from all of these raw photos, we can zoom in on the footage during the hyperlapse to add another dimension to it. We'll start the zoom right before our speed ramp ends. Just hit S on your keyboard to show the scale property and hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe. We'll then move along the timeline to about the 2-second mark and increase the scale property. Around 50% or so works well for this, but if you want to make it more dramatic, you can scale all the way up to 100% without losing any resolution. If you need to adjust the position as well, you can do that by hitting the P key and then make any necessary keyframes. Let's then move 10 frames ahead and copy the scale keyframe from the beginning and paste it here to scale back out. We also want to ramp the speed as the hyperlapse zooms back out, so let's set another time remap keyframe where the scale starts. Now we'll bring in our time remapping keyframe, marking the end of our clip to the end of the scale animation. There we have it. The last thing we'll do is add a little atmosphere to the shot. Now, it works better to sell the effect if you're at a higher altitude, but if we want to add a cloud or two, we can easily do that here. We'll start by creating a white solid by going to Layer, New, Solid. We'll make the color almost completely white, and now we'll add the fractal noise effect to our new solid. For fractal type, let's change that to cloudy, and let's also scale it up about 400. We can also add an expression to the evolution property to add a little movement to the noise. Just Option or Alt-click the stopwatch next to evolution, and we'll type in time, then the asterisk key, 10. We're gonna now change the blending mode to screen. All right, now we just wanna scale up the cloud layer to make it look as though the camera is passing through it. The S key will display the scale property, and we can just keyframe to scale up to about 120%. Okay, now let's animate the opacity as well. Hit T on the keyboard to display the opacity property. We'll lower the opacity to around 30% or so, and then we'll fade it out to 0%. We can also duplicate this layer and use the pen tool to draw a rough cloud-shaped mask. Then we can feather the mask to about 150 pixels or so. And then we can offset the time by dragging this layer about 5 frames to the right. I'm also going to drop the opacity on the second cloud a little. All right, let's take a look at what we have.
Finished his movie. No kidding. Wow, that's great.
Today's video is sponsored by the one and only Skillshare. Skillshare is a resource that Daniel and I love having available to us whenever we want to learn something new.
Just a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to start learning the program Sketch, so I checked out a class on mobile app design using Sketch. This class was super helpful and gave me a solid foundation for this program. If you've seen some of our videos this past year, we've learned how to cook killer grilled cheese, how to craft floral crowns that Carlton hates, and get more in depth with programs like Adobe Illustrator and InDesign.
If you want to learn more drone techniques, they've got you covered. There's also hundreds of classes on After Effects if you're interested in developing your motion graphics skill set. There's over 18,000 classes for you to learn from, and right now, the first 500 people to sign up using our link will get the first 2 months for absolutely free. Click the link in the description to get started.
We hope you enjoyed this tutorial on drone hyperlapses. Make sure you turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a video, and we'll see you next Monday.